Just on the phone, just now.
There's no milk for the board.
Are there any blanks?
We don't have any blanks.
I think Rabbi Haas said she should get her
She's
spell.
getting more paper, Margaret. Rabbi Husband, more paper than not listening.
Well,
Not listening to anyone, so.
it's crazy. So. But I did get what I need. So I like to continue to work. All kinds of things.
Anyway, going back.
So that.
I don't know, I'm good.
Let's see, I had.
No, I couldn't be.
Still me without this. That's so my hands and I think there's stuff that. Yeah, I looked it out here, there's a place to something in there. It's like. I sort of got all in between the schools.
But I.
No problems.
I feel like every.
What's happening? Is it possible for us to get the cabin here as well as do the other room?
On the sheet.
Then there's a marker. And then I have markers over there, right?
Horrible names, but I'll try.
Need cardstock. I'll get that marker. I know here. 3 months. Here's the marker.
Oh, let me try.
Let's see, who needs a marker?
I do.
Great, and then we sort of went over to number 2.
I can share.
Oh, she's welcome.
I'm on the kindergarten.
Hi, you joining?
Didn't she tell us it might be her?
I'm so sorry. Today we were.
I didn't get to share. She was 11 years older than I That's right.
I just wanted to say.
Massachusetts. I last time. I love the two.
Maddie.
With the kids.
That doesn't look like.
You know what? Hi. Okay. We're gonna get started. Okay, let's get started, everyone.
I'm always.
Okay, let's get started. Hello, everyone. Hey, how are you? I love you. And so the. Sounds yeah, she's. Okay, hello, all my friends are here, wonderful, hello online, good to see everybody. If you don't have a name tag, name tent, we have extra paper that you can make one. Hi.
Would you mind if I can stay for the whole time?
Not at all, you stay for as long as you can.
And also, at Temple, we can say your name to everybody.
Lila, yeah.
Rabbi read.
Oh. Yeah. Nice. Okay, that's a good idea. Thank you for telling me. Okay.
And we love it when we want to call you.
You're so sweet. Thank you. Hello, hello, hello.
All right, can you read this?
Maddie, I got you. You're good. Okay, wonderful. Yeah.
I have a chair for you.
Hello, everybody. Sweet. I love that. That's a happy card. Okay, so we're gonna start, we're really gonna start this time, I promise. Welcome, everybody. It's nice to see everybody around the table. We have a few new faces to our Lunch and Learn circle, so I'm just gonna have everyone, anyone who is new with us today to introduce themselves. When you do that, introduce yourself and share with us. Share with us what brings you here to this space today, okay? Who would like to begin? Alan, great.
I'm Alan Loud, most of you know me, I did Lunch and Learn before COVID, decided to come back again. That's all, that's what prompted me. I thought the subject matter was a little more interesting than some of the other ones have been.
Okay, well, welcome. We're so happy to have you on the table.
Spencer, joined Humble Bethel just about a month ago officially,
Welcome.
and I wanna show up for as many things as I can because school gets really busy in 2 weeks. And I won't be showing up much to anything other than campus.
Great, well, we're so happy to have you. Hey, Patty.
Okay, I'm here off and on, I'm Maddie Schlesinger, and just happy to be with my fellow partmates. Thank you.
Oh, heart rates, I love that. That's so beautiful. Thank you.
Carrie Nation. I've only done this once or twice and can be rabbi, and I have enjoyed hearing you so much and purple. I'd like to give it a little bit of a try and think for yoga.
Great, wonderful. We're so thrilled you were doing your, physically preparing yourself for now to spiritually prepare yourself. I love it. Lovely. Susan.
I'm a member, I got a member, I got an invitation, but let's go see what you're saying.
Love it. Beautiful. Thank you.
I'm with her, so she said she was coming, so I said I'm coming.
Okay, those are the best kinds of invitations. I love it. Hello, Sunny. Hello. Okay, great. Wonderful. Yeah, it's good. What do you need?
Sunny needs.
Oh, Sunny. Okay. There's some here.
Oh,
Do you need any, do you need one?
That's it.
Yeah. Okay, so today it's actually a very interesting day that we are here for Torah study. We are gonna be doing a little Torah study, but for Lunch and Learn, especially with regards to our topic.
don't wanna sit and.
So our topic, as we've explored, that we just started, monumental. Moments in Jewish time that shape the generations. And last week we discovered about the creation story, the creation of human beings, and we explored the idea that we were each given this nefesh chaya, this breath of life in the form of a soul that brought us into being, so that we could be engaged in this world, but with this essence that's deep within us. Today, actually Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, it's a haunting day in the Jewish calendar. It calls us to remember the tragedies that have befallen our people throughout history, starting with the destruction of both temples in Jerusalem, 586 BCE, 70 CE, and then throughout the history of our people, moments in time that happened on the 9th of Av, whether it's the expulsion from Spain in 1492, which occurs, the edict is set for the 9th of Av. The Warsaw Ghetto deportation of the Jews begins on the 9th of Av. And subsequently 250,000 Jews in that first deportation are sent to Treblinka and who are gassed. The AMIA bombing in Argentina that killed 85 people occurred on Tisha B'Av. So these moments in time that call us to pause and remember and reflect. And also to mourn and to grieve as a community. And experiencing that loss and that pain and those moments that transform us as a community. And so today, because it's Tisha B'Av, I wanted us to reflect on, to study a moment in time, in Jewish time, that transformed the way we all here practice and understand Judaism. And that is the destruction of the Second Temple. So I want to first take us visually to this space. I'm asking us to travel to Jerusalem, to stand and imagine ourselves standing at the bottom of the walls. It's coming. So you know, the city of David, the city of Jerusalem is that fortified system of walls. And the Holy Temple was in that section of in the center of this fortified city. And the Romans set the temple ablaze. And so I want you to look at this picture. And I want you to sit with it for just a few moments. And in just a few moments, I'm going to ask you to share, what do you see? And what are the first emotions that you feel? And just sort of name those emotions. So just take a moment. What do you see? And what do you feel when you look at this picture? Anyone like to share? What do you see?
I'll start.
Right.
I'm not sure because my eyesight is not the best, but it's the people. I mean, obviously, some of them are Roman, but it looks like there are others that are cringy and part of the population.
Okay, so you see
Fear. I may be incorrect.
no, you see people and there's fear. Okay, great. Who else? What do you see? What do you feel?
My first reaction is horror.
Horror, okay. Great. Maddie,
I see connection and destruction.
connection and destruction. Okay, interesting. Beautiful. Spencer,
I see the second of many. And I feel like, well, yep, Jewish history. Cool.
okay.
That's what I felt. Exactly, like, oh.
Again, it's Jewish history, Jewish story, okay? Interesting, beautiful. What else? Anything else? Yeah,
Plus sadness.
sadness.
I can remember walking up by that wall with Temple Bethel on a trip, going to a restaurant. I mean, walking in that whole area and to see that picture is just horrifyingly sad.
Okay. So I'm gonna leave the image up for just another minute as I give some context. So I want you to imagine, we learn from our Torah about setting up for this temple. We start with the building of the Mishkan, the portable dwelling place of God in the Torah. And what goes into it, the priests are going to be anointed to care for this sacred space that we learn is the dwelling place of God. That this is where God will dwell, in this city, in this space. We as a people are told that we are to bring our offerings at certain times of the year, at certain points of our lives, that we bring an offering is handed to the priest, the priest will offer it up to God. You'll see this smoke of the sacrifice, and that is this holy connection between the people, the priests, and God. That is the way that we communicate. We know where to go, we know what to do, we know how to observe our commandments and the way in which we live our lives through this edict and these mitzvot. And all of it brings us to this place. Everything that we know about what it means to live according to God's ways from the Torah brings us to a certain place in Jerusalem, to this temple, where we offer up the sacrifice. And that is how we, as a people, understood our role and our connection with the divine. And now you can sort of see the people down below in the valley. Imagine them standing, looking upwards, and the flame and the smoke and the blaze. And in many ways, what we understood as a people was that was where God dwelled. God's house is literally on fire. The only way we knew how to communicate and engage with God was in this place. And this place is experiencing a horrific scene. It is on fire. It is being destroyed. So if we allow ourselves to sort of step out of where we currently are and place ourselves in the shoes of our ancestors who are standing in that valley, looking up at God's house on fire, what's the first question that would come to our minds?
What becomes of us?
What becomes of us? Why is this happening? Where is God? Is God in there? Where does God go? Where now do we go? How do we connect with God? How do we live according to all of these ways in which that we know how to now understand to be Am Yisrael, the people of Israel, when the centerpiece, the core, the house is crumbling? You can imagine the incredible fear, the pain, the sense of what happens next? Where do we go from here? What does it mean to be Jewish now if we don't have a place to bring our sacrifices? If we engage in something that we're supposed to now offer a sacrifice, we don't have a place to offer a sacrifice, how do we connect with God? And what will happen to us if we don't bring that sacrifice? Right? All of these questions that are flooding our minds as we experience the horrific scene of destruction of the temple. Who would like to read? Anita, great.
Destruction of temples in Jerusalem, 70 CE, 9th of Av. In the heart of Jerusalem, under a sky streaked with smoke and flame, I stood, paralyzed. As the sacred stones of our temple crumbled, before me the holy temple, the dwelling place of God, was engulfed in a fierce inferno. The golden menorah, once a symbol of divine light, now twisted and melted. The sacred tapestries, which had so often been the backdrop to our prayers and sacrifices, were consumed by voracious flames, their intricate patterns reduced to ash and memory. The temple was not just a building, it was the heart of our connection to the divine, the center of our spiritual universe. To see it burn was to watch a part of ourselves die. Around me, people fell to their knees, tearing their garments in mourning. The sound of our lamentations rose to the heavens, a haunting melody of sorrow and despair.
Continue.
In that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of loss. not just for the physical structure, but for the spiritual anchor it represented. The temple was a place where heaven and earth met, where we felt the presence of God most intimately. But amidst the despair, a small, stubborn flame of hope flickered within me. Our faith, our covenant with God, could not be extinguished. We would mourn, we would grieve, but we would also rebuild. For the spirit of our people would rise from the ashes of this devastation.
Initial reaction?
I need to know that before I can react.
No, I don't want to say anything.
Okay.
What's your reaction?
My reaction is it's a first person account of an event that happened 2,000 years ago.
Mhm.
Unusual to have one.
Yeah, so it's a midrash. I wrote in reaction to imagining what our people could have actually been, because we didn't have necessarily that first person account, right? Preserved in such a way. So for this, and I feel like it's an event, this moment that we're gonna talk about in just a moment, transforms the way that we understand Judaism, the way that we practice Judaism, rabbinic Judaism, is what is the evolution. It's literally the moment that transforms Judaism as a result of the destruction of the temple. Because as we're standing there, everything that we know to be true about our faith and connection to God is burning. And so in a moment in time, we have to make a decision, a choice. Does that mean that we now, the way that we understand our faith, cease to exist? Or do we make the decision to reimagine, to transform, to evolve, to change? It's in that moment that we decide that our connection with God is going to transform space. And that is an enormous moment in the history of our narrative. Because had we said we can only live according to the Torah and sacrifice and the way that we've practiced, then we say to ourselves, it's gone. But we pivot. So often we think about the modifications, the changes, the advancements, the modernity, the modern elements that we place on our tradition is only, 20 years old, right? Or 50 years old, or Reform Judaism changed Judaism, right? This is an incredible moment. It's a moment that we consciously made a choice to shift and pivot to maintain a Judaism that now is going to have, that needed to be a different perspective, a different understanding, a different way for us to engage with it in order to maintain its relevance, its future, its dynamic nature. And so this point in our history allows for us now to say, wait a second, we don't need just a specific time and place to connect with God. You know that book of Deuteronomy? That book of Deuteronomy says, I don't need the priest. I don't need the sacrifice. I just need the hafta. You shall, what? Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. For us, that seems, yeah, I know, I got it, right? But that's so transformative. That mindset of, oh, you mean I don't need to just get a ram or a lamb and go to the priest and then have the priest offer it up to God? That's not the only way to connect with God? No, wait a second. The book of Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy says, we actually have the ability to connect with God as an individual. It doesn't have to just be a communal experience at a certain place. all the way in Jerusalem. That's important, it's critical, but it's not the only time and place that I can connect with God. And as a result of the destruction of the second temple, we start to see this shift and this change, and I wanted to get here because Rabbi Yochanan is the impetus for this. Okay, so it says, yeah, Maddie.
I just wanna make a comment that struck me right now, that we as people, this is a prime example, are not the ones to stay stuck or paralyzed. We have this flame, this hope inside. And we, we look for divine guidance to help us and have that faith. And I see it as a parent in so many stories that I hear from the Bible. That this, belief, this thread, whether it's Moses or, other people. And I think that's so reassuring that no matter what, we're not, we're not just lamenting in the situation.
Right, because exactly right, and Rabbi Levins mentioned it last night, that we could have, 354 days of lament. Right, if you think about like all the things that have happened, but we have one day a year. In terms of a communal lamentation, grief, mourning. We take one day and we remember. Right, we take one day and we say, this is the day that we're going to honor the memory of the things that have happened. But we're not gonna do it every single day, right? But one of the things I like that you said is that we're not a paralyzed people, right? This idea, and that's where I think Rabbi Yochanan, is a perfect example of what you just mentioned. So according to tradition, does anyone want to read? You want me to read?
Yeah, you have to see it as.
Oh, okay.
I'll read.
I tried, it's like 35 fonts. Okay, yeah, Alan, great.
The story of Rabbi Yochanan. According to tradition, Rabbi Yochanan lived in Jerusalem in 68 CE when the city was under siege by the Roman general Vespasian. In those days, Jerusalem was controlled by the Zealots, Jews who would rather die than surrender to Rome. These are the same people who controlled Masada. In their struggle against the Romans, the Zealots refused to let anyone surrender and let no one leave the walled city of Jerusalem. Rabbi Yochanan urged surrender, knowing that the Romans would ultimately win. He created a plan to ensure that Judaism survived under Roman rule. First, he faked his own death and had his disciples smuggle him out of Jerusalem in a coffin.
Okay, so Rabbi Yochanan sees what's happening. He says to himself, things are not going well for us. This doesn't look good, right? We need a plan, not paralyzed, right? He says, we need a plan. This is not gonna last long here. We aren't gonna last long here. And so he creates a plan. He fakes his own death. His students take him out of Jerusalem in a coffin. Continue.
They carried the coffin to Vespasian's tent, where to everyone's surprise, Yochanan emerged from the coffin. He told Vespasian that he had a vision. Some would say a smart political insight. And Vespasian would soon be emperor, and he asked Vespasian to set aside a place in Yavna in the Galilee near modern Rehoboth, where he could start a small school and study Torah in peace. Vespasian promised that if the prophecy came true, he would grant his request. Vespasian became emperor within a year and kept his word, allowing the school to be established after the war was over. School Rabbi Yochanan established in Yavna became the center of Jewish learning for centuries and replaced Jerusalem as the seat of the Sanhedrin, where Jewish law was debated.
Okay. This is the moment that shifts and changes everything that we know and understand about what it means to practice Judaism at this point in time. And that continues to be the way we practice Judaism. The truest, connection in terms of study, the process of debate, of where the Mishnah will come, oral law will then be transcribed from oral law to the written law, then Talmud. All of that is a result of what's happening at Yavne.
So what religion was this back then?
He's Roman.
But he was a nice one.
Here's what I would say.
Want to go to the temple.
Today, right, it's an easy drive, not a terrible drive from Jerusalem to the Galilee. It was a real trek back in those days. You could almost imagine that it was like a world away in terms of Jerusalem to Yavne. What happens here with Rabbi Yochanan is Rabbi Yochanan thinks to himself, they want Jerusalem, they're gonna conquer Jerusalem. If we stay put, we are not being realistic about our future. We don't have a future there. They are too strong and mighty. This won't last, and unfortunately, we can't protect the temple. And Yochanan says to himself, well, in that case, we need a plan B. And not just a plan B for a location, right? Because the location is now going to be in the Galilee, which is, it really could have been a world away in terms of what it takes to get from Galilee to Jerusalem. But he doesn't just say we're going to just dwell there. He says we're not going to just dwell there. We're actually going to create an entirely new way of connecting with one another, of practicing our tradition, of learning, and of creating now an entirely new understanding of what it means to live according to the laws of our tradition, because everything was Jerusalem based. So we had to now this is not exile, this is not diaspora, because it's still Galilee, it's still the land, but it might as well have been in terms of proximity to space. Because if everything is make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem and offer the sacrifice at the temple in Jerusalem, and now we're living in Galilee and we can't get there, then what does it mean to practice Judaism? In the Galilee and with Rabbi Yochanan, not only do we have now Yavne in terms of a learning center to try to now learn and reimagine the text like we do in our classes, but also what's going to happen is the creation of synagogues, plural. This is where, from an archaeological perspective, when we started to dig and find these synagogues in the Galilee, in this region, where they started to create the synagogue as a community center, right? Think about Temple Bethel, but much smaller, okay, in the Galilee. But it was a place that now people were drawn to start learning, a place that people were drawn to utter words of liturgy, that people were drawn to forge connection with the people who were there, to rely on one another and find comfort with one another, because everything that they have known to be true burned down. And so they had to recreate these smaller synagogues to say, this is also a holy, sacred space and a dwelling place for God. Oh, God can dwell somewhere else? Amazing. We can come together in community and learn, and the presence of the Shekinah will join us. Amazing. You mean we can personally connect to God and to our tradition? Incredible. I thought I always needed somebody else, or I needed something, or an animal, or a fire, or a flame. No. By coming together and engaging in the conversation and the debate and the wrestling and trying to understand how can we make Judaism more meaningful and relevant, because we are no longer in Jerusalem at the temple, begins this incredible transformation of what it means to live and see the world through a Jewish lens. And it happens and begins in Yavne.
I'm an educator at heart. This is mind-boggling Because this is the beginning of a tradition of literacy which sets the Jewish people apart from the other peoples of the world. Because no matter where we lived, we had literacy. And the beginning also of why we thrive. Because as we travel from city to city, we bring information with us, Torah, but also other information. I never thought of this way before.
And-
It's interesting.
And what is also what's interesting about what you say too is the importance of building a school, right? In any community that you go to, there are certain things that a Jewish community is set up in a new place, there are certain things that have to be created, right? The cemetery, a school, synagogue, right? These are important institutions, but that they represent the core values, right, of who we are and what we believe. And Yavne becomes a model for that. And then 100, 200 years later, all of a sudden that's oral law, they're saying, wait a second, there is so much richness here. We have to take it from the oral, we've got to start writing this down, right? Like this, there's so much here. We're starting, all of a sudden the Babylonian Talmud, the Mishnah and Babylonian Talmud, all this is going to start to happen. And we realize we can no longer rely on the Tanaim, who are the ones who memorize the oral law and teach it in the big cheders and the big study houses. We've got to now write it down. We've got to canonize it. We've got to create our living compendium of Jewish books and research areas and topics and halacha, Jewish law, that this now all of a sudden evolves so much that now takes on a whole new form, but it becomes the place, right? The one place now becomes multiple places and spaces, as well as empowers each and every one of us to form our own intimate personal connection, not just with the divine, but also with the tradition. That for us sitting around this table, you're like, yeah, I know, I do that. But imagine that this happens for the first time. The idea that you can talk to God wherever you are, mind blowing. I can access our tradition and our rituals myself, mind blowing. From a moment in time that is focused on destruction, out of that destruction comes transformation and light. And an entirely new way to understand the future of Jewish life, Jewish learning, Jewish prayer, and the way that we see the world through a Jewish lens. All from this moment in time. Yeah.
It's also the end of the priesthood
Mhm.
and the beginning of the rabbinic tradition.
Right. Right.
If I could just give you a little aside, I visited Ethiopia in 1971.
Wow.
For the Arabs, and the priest came to conduct the morning service.
Mhm.
And we were told he is a priest because he goes back, his tradition goes back to before the destruction of the second temple.
Yeah.
They also had a rabbi who had studied in England who was back there, but I found that fascinating, that priesthood.
So what's interesting that you bring up, that's right, because after the temple's destroyed, the priesthood and the priests, now they have to reimagine their roles. They're out of a job, okay? Now, the rabbinic Judaism is born. What's interesting about the Ethiopian Jewish community, when I was living in Israel during my year of study for rabbinical school, I volunteered with the Ethiopian Absorption Center. And I had two sweet, precious girls who had just come into Israel 6 months prior, and our role was to help them learn Hebrew. But the Ethiopian community at the time, and especially at the time at which you're speaking of, only knew Torahitic Judaism. So they only understood Judaism from the 5 books. So the priests, the Mishkan, sacrifice, right? That's what they understood to be Judaism, right? They did not know that there were Jews who looked any different than them. And their goal was to get to Jerusalem, right? Like that's what the Torah tells us. So the powerful story about the airlifts in the first airlift in 1980s with Operation Moses was that in order to get the children on the airplane, because they'd never seen an airplane before, after they had made this 2-week journey through civil war ravaged Ethiopia by foot, walking at night, they had a big airplane on the runway. And they couldn't get the children on the airplane because they were terrified. They had no idea what that was. And so after many, many attempts, the Israeli army, they couldn't get them on. One of the translators, one of the young children, young men that spoke Amharic, the Ethiopian language, said, do you mind if I say something to them? And they're like, say whatever you want, but we have to go. We've got like the airspace of like 3 minutes. He said one line in Amharic, and the children stood up and rushed the plane. So they said, what did you say? And they said, you'll be taken to Jerusalem on the wings of eagles. They've never seen an eagle before. Right? It's like, right? And so if you think about that, the power of that space, right? Of Yerushalayim, of the power of the tradition, the power of the words. And then you also imagine standing there and watching it burn. You also say to yourself, like, what's next for me? And the power is, where do the wings of eagles take us next? Although we're always spiritually connected to the land of Israel and to Jerusalem and Yavne and Babylonian Talmud, the Jerusalem Talmud, that understanding and reimagining that there are elements to our tradition that are paramount that we must have, but we have to now shift our language a little bit because we're not, the agricultural laws of Jerusalem are one thing to know and understand because we will return, right? From Yavne and the rabbinic Judaism was not a disassociation with Jerusalem, it's the hopeful return, knowing that we will return. But in the meantime, we now need to create an entire subset of halacha, of Jewish law and practice and ritual that is done outside of Jerusalem, in exile. And that's the creation of the Babylonian Talmud, to teach us that the Jerusalem Talmud, we know we will need it one day when we are able to come back and have sovereignty over our land, but in the meantime, which is also an amazing moment in time, this in the meantime. Not just saying, yes, we will return, and when we do, we'll go back to practicing that way. That's not what we said. What we said was the richness of the connection, the importance of maintaining that intimate connection and relationship and faith and practice and law is so important that we will create an entire new subset, then way that we understand and live our lives Jewishly in exile and in diaspora. All of that stems from this one particular moment in time. So Rabbi Yochanan has also been called the father of wisdom and the father of generations of scholars, because he ensured the continuation of Jewish scholarship after Jerusalem fell to Rome in 70 CE. He is the one that it's attributed that if he said, if you happen to be holding a sapling in your hand, when they tell you that the Messiah has arrived, first plant the sapling, then go out and greet the Messiah. Do you know this story? So this is this is a beautiful teaching of our tradition, and it's attributed to Rabbi Yochanan. And it makes even more sense because of what we've just learned about him and his belief of in creating the future. But for him, for Rabbi Yochanan, the idea that you plant and you bring life through this tree that will provide shade and oxygen and beauty, right? That is more important to continue making sure that that sapling is planted than going out to greet the Messiah. Yes, you go out and greet him or her. Just make sure that you don't, that you plant the tree. Because the idea is that our engagement with maintaining and creating and providing for the future generations takes precedent. I always think about this teaching when I'm in Israel, I always, doesn't matter how many times I go, I always plant a tree in Israel.
Yeah, weird.
And every time I plant that tree, I think, this could be the time, right? Mashiach could be coming, I'm in Jerusalem, things could happen. I'll plant the tree there, right? Right, the idea is you always are gonna, you're always going to engage in that act of digging in that soil. Planting that tree, knowing that I am taking the responsibility and obligated to engage in the mitzvah of doing what I can to bring about, a time of peace and tranquility and goodness. But it's also my responsibility to provide for the generations who come after me. And that's attributed to Rabbi Yochanan, which makes so much sense if we think about his role in the continuation and the evolution of Judaism post the destruction of the Second Temple.
So is that where our tradition of planting trees in Israel stems from, or is that other than?
So I think there's probably twofold, but there's a beautiful, like you can create a beautiful connection between Rabbi Yochanan and the planting of trees. But also trees hold so much significance in Judaism, right? The Torah is an Eitz Chaim, is a tree of life. So that idea of rooting ourselves in Torah in the land, but also just the need for that land to have trees, right? From a very practical perspective. That I don't know the numbers off the top of my head today, but the vast number of Israel's trees have been hand planted. Right, making that desert bloom. And so and what that means for the land, the country, and for the future. But the idea of trees and why it's a tree is also rooted in the tradition of the notion of that we are those roots. The Torah is the thing that roots us, and we blossom from Torah. And that the Torah is this Eitz Chaim, this living Torah, all connects to the importance of actually planting. And it's also like getting your own hands dirty in the creation of the state and the maintaining of the holy land. Someone over here, yeah, so this.
What's testing us as a people, the destruction, our strength?
It depends on your theology, right? If that's your theology, okay, you could make an argument for that, right? Just as Abraham, God tests Abraham, right? Right, if you want to use that, Yisat Abraham, test Abraham. Okay, yeah, you could absolutely make that argument. Right? You could also make the argument of that moment in time with the destruction of the temple, thinking about it from a personal perspective, there are moments in our lives where things are devastated, where we feel a personal destruction, where we feel a personal heavy loss. What are the choices that we will make, can make, hope to make, must make, try to make, in order to evolve in that moment, or a few minutes later, right? The idea that we have that personal responsibility, incumbent upon ourselves, or that personal prayer for ourselves. How will we rebuild? We all have those moments in our lives where we stop and say, this moment, I feel shattered. How will I rebuild? What do I need to rebuild? Who will help me rebuild? And whether we look to God and or to others, to ourselves, right? All in that moment, I think there's a beautiful model in the moment that happened from a historical perspective and from from the narrative of the Jewish people that helps to model for us that in such a moment of horror and devastation, that we chose to pivot and take a path that would actually lead not just to an evolution in the way we understand Judaism, but into an everlasting model of what it means to live Jewishly, because all of us sitting around the table today are students of Rabbi Yochanan and his model and understanding of what it means to live, learn, practice, see, believe, communicate, connect Jewishly. Any questions, any more questions?
I just want to say, Jesus was the first one who rose from the dead.
That's exactly what I was thinking of.
Oh,
Exactly what I was thinking.
I was wondering where, Margaret, where you, and the long pause, Margaret, the long pause, Margaret. I was holding on.
Copied everything.
Okay, so,
Two questions.
yeah, please.
First question. So if through some miracle, there was a third temple, what would
In the old city of Jerusalem, there is an entire organization who has devoted their work to being ready for when that third temple is built, they have everything ready to go. The vestments, the priestly garb, the whole shtick. So it's there for you to explore further.
Second question?
Right, we can move on. Yeah.
And okay, second
Right.
question. So if in fact there was an enormous
Saying to place it that way. So I
Our sound is gone, mine too. I can't hear you either.
I lost them.
Okay.
Stand by. Let's see what happens. Oh. People. Oh. On mute. Can you still hear me, Phil? Lila, you're muted. They can.
Yeah, I can hear you, but we can't hear them. I mean, it's almost over anyway, but it was
Yeah.
very interesting what they were talking about.
You could use the wireless keyboard to unmute also.
Ah, there we go.
Okay.
Goats to love.
Back.
Sacrifice them.
So for me, the way I see it is when we create new rituals. When we create new rituals, when we think differently about music, when we create new liturgical poems and additions and new prayer books. Right, or write new prayer books. To me, I think it's totally, for me, I think it's an incredible ode to an expression to the actual initial shift and evolution and transformation of going from Toraitic biblical theology to rabbinic Judaism, and I celebrate that. I think that to me is what a wonderful link, an incredible long chain of tradition of meeting the needs of the people, of recognizing the context, the personal and spiritual evolution of a community, and being able to reflect that within our liturgy, within our ritual, within maintaining still the beauty of our tradition, because I think it is so rich and so beautiful, and not abandoning it, but actually building upon it. To me, I personally see it as linking back into a long, beautiful chain of those types of shifts and changes and moments of personal evolution and transformation. That's how I see it and how I understand it.
You know, I agree with you. I think that the idea that we're not just associated with a thing, a wall, the chapel, but it's within us. And it's no matter where we go, we still have our beliefs. You don't have to be right there at a place. And that's what's kept us going this time.
Yeah, and also recognizing that when we are in that place,
Yes.
there is also that majesty and that beauty.
Yes.
I will say, last night we streamed live the Kotel for Tisha B'Av. For me, it's a very special place for me personally. And in our tradition, it talks about that is the place where the Kotel is, where heaven and earth meet. I personally always think about that. When I think about that space, when I walk up to that wall, when I walk up to the Kotel, and I think about what does it mean to actually walk up and stand in that transition point? That one little spot, like where these two spaces, these two beautiful realms meet, and I'm in the middle of that meeting point. What do I bring to that? Right? What does it offer to me? Right? And so for us, and it's linking us back to that space, but also knowing that the spark of the divine is within each of us, and how that empowers and strengthens us to bring that spark out into the world and to illuminate the world with God's beauty and divinity. And having all of that sort of like creates the dynamic Judaism that we all have and experience. And we do that as a result of, and we can do that and imagine it. And it all stems from that particular moment in time, truly a moment in time that has shaped and continues to shape the generations and the future of Judaism.
I think it also speaks to the resiliency of Judaism, how we're still around, we continue to adapt to the circumstances of our time.
Yeah.
I mean, if we were just sticking with let's slaughter lambs at the altar and let's just build a new altar, I think someone would have come and kicked down that altar by now.
Yeah, that's true. So I want to end with one thing. I'm going to ask you all to read this one set of prayer with me. So we all know the Ve'ahavta, right? You shall love the Lord your God. I want us to offer it right now, though, in a different way. From a personal perspective, rather than you shall love the Lord your God. I've changed it because we can do that from Rabbi Yochanan's example. For it to be more from the individual. I don't know why this isn't letting me put this full screen for you. So let me just try it one more time. We're having some zooming situation here. We're gonna end today reading, hopefully, reading this section. Here we go. And I want you to, as you recite it, I want you to,
We needed more.
I know, there's something going on with the computer. I want you to, as you read it, how does it sound to you? And is there a difference? So let's read together. I will love Adonai, my God, with all my heart, with all my soul, and with all my might. I will take to heart these instructions with which you charged me this day. I will teach them to my children. I will recite them when I'm at home and when I'm on my way, when I lie down and when I get up. I will bind them as a sign on my hand and let them serve as a symbol on my forehead. I will inscribe them on the doorposts of my house and on my gates. Thus I will remember to observe all your commandments and be holy to my God. You are Adonai, my God, who brought me out of the land of Egypt to be my God. You are Adonai, my God. It's a moment that transformed the generations. It's a moment that allowed us to know that we individually, each and every one of us, can recite words like this to say, I will love my God with all my heart, with all my soul, and with all my might. And I will take these words and inscribe them on my heart and on my hand, and they will continuously be a symbol for me to know how I have the beauty and the power and the strength and the resilience and the mitzvah to live my life according to the laws and the ways and the mitzvot that God has given to me and to you. Look forward to seeing you next week.